Hello, everybody. It's John here. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. I still see a person joining every few seconds or so. So maybe what we'll do is I'm going to throw up a couple polls while we wait. I don't think we're going to take the whole hour today. So we'll give you back a piece of it, unless Jason and I start cracking terrible jokes, as we usually do. But to start off, I'm going to ask a couple questions just to sort of understand where most of you guys are at today. So this question is about, how you're currently hosting GP. So of course, the first option is in our own office or data center. This means you have a location somewhere within your premises or one of your offices where GP is, hosted with your GP functional support partner, hosted in a cloud like Azure, AWS, or other. So you've embraced the cloud, but you're maybe not in a software as a service model like what we offer. And the last option is you have absolutely no idea. And at the end of today, I bet you will. Wow. The results so far are a bit shocking. I'm going to leave it for a few others to answer. We have a lot of votes on this one. So Jason, if you can believe this, 100% of the people here today are hosted in their own office or data center.
Really? That is a bit surprising.
I guess it is and it isn't. That's probably why most of you are here. So
that's
all
true.
Right, so we'll close this off. I still see a few people joining. I got one more poll before we get rolling today. I'm leaving it there just because it's hard. I can't believe that. Okay, and the next one is, what are you looking to get out of today? And depending on what you guys answer, we'll tweak where I spend a lot of my time. Not that we won't cover all of these things, but just curious what areas you're most interested in. Yeah, I'll say over the last, we'll call it month or two since COVID-19 and everything happened, we've received a lot of phone calls from organizations that are just looking for ways to bring their costs down, or do they really need to pay their annual enhancement fees? These are all things that we're going to cover today in quite a lot of detail. So interesting, it's pretty split here. So I'm just going to share the results of this one, so you guys can see. But yeah, I think we'll cover all of this. We will spend a good part of today talking about money. So yay. Let's get started. I think we have enough of everybody joined. Appreciate everybody joining today. Today's session is going to be about, if you're thinking about or if you've thought about moving GP to the cloud, we want to cover a lot of the mistakes that we see made often, and also some considerations. Sometimes we'll see a company move to the cloud and then they maybe didn't know what they were getting into, or they didn't know that they could have done things a different way. So today is as unbiased as we can be, being a cloud-hosted GP company. And we just want to give you guys a lot of perspective of what's in the market and what to consider ultimately before making the transition. Everybody here is, of course, not a current GP365 customer, so I think that's really cool. It'll put you all sort of on a level playing field. So a little bit about us. That was our office when we were allowed to go in it. Of course, now we are not, but we are based out of Toronto, Canada. We have many customers across North America. Most of our customers are in the United States, and all we do is GP. In terms of support, we also have a sister company who's sort of like your typical functional support partner that does everything from, you're having an issue with a smart list, or you need help closing a year end, or you want to create a report. All of those sorts of functions are done through our sister company, ADAM, and we are a software as a service hosted product for GP, which we're going to talk about later. So a couple things to mention here just before we move on is GP, again, is all that we do. So if you go to our website, all of the sessions that are there relate to GP. All of our training sessions, basically every piece of blog, and there's a lot of them there, all relate to Dynamics Great Plains. So it's a really great resource for all of you that are new to us to check out. And we're also partner friendly. So if you're working with another GP partner, I am not here to get you to end that relationship. In fact, I would encourage you to keep it if things are going well. That is fantastic. We work with partners all over North America. And just remember that if you decide to stay with them, you can still use GP365. And in fact, we encourage that. It's very, very, very common. Okay, so let's talk about the technical side of things, and I'm going to try and not get too technical here, but what is GP hosting and what are your options? So the first option is what pretty much all of you are using. This is where you have GP hosted in your office, someone manages it. Usually it's a blend of your IT managing, the server and the hardware, and then your partner managing the actual product of GP. Upgrades are typically done manually and they're paid, which is why most of you, that actually would have been an interesting poll, probably are on an older version of GP because it's expensive and oftentimes, the value of upgrading isn't explained very well. So it just ends up being one of those products that stays there and isn't upgraded a whole lot. So the on-premise way is sort of considered the old way of hosting GP. The next option is hosting it inside of a Microsoft cloud or an Amazon Web Services cloud, but doing it by yourself with your own IT, or maybe your GP provider or something like that. Upgrades are still done manually, which means you still have to budget for them and pay for them. And there's a few different sort of partner options sometimes that use infrastructure as a service. That's that abbreviation there, the IaaS. But this option isn't overly popular, as a lot of companies don't see it as a huge value, and it's also really expensive. So I'm going to show you in, 20 minutes or so, the pricing comparison between these three options, just roughly based on 3 users, to give you a sense of, if you spent the time to evaluate each of these, kind of where you'd end up. And lastly is a software as a service product like us. The whole idea here is you're paying a monthly fee per user and everything is included. So your upgrades are included. If you have a technical issue, like you can't open GP or access GP, there's no cost for any of the support. It's designed to be a really budget, simple experience. And of course, you're also always on the latest version of GP, much like all of your other software as a service products like Office 365, or if you're using any other sort of similar products. So with that, Jason, anything else to add? Did I explain it pretty well?
I think you got it all covered there, I would say.
All right. And no questions. And I should actually mention, apologies, if anybody has a question, feel free to enter it in the questions box and we'll come to it at the end. If it's essential to get to your question before we move further, Jason will interrupt me or I'll interrupt him, depending on who's talking, and we'll break. So let's keep rolling here. Next one is the good and the bad of each of these 3 options. So just quickly, on-premise, the good side of what you guys are doing now is that you have complete control of the infrastructure. That's usually a big pro for IT people, just because they like to have that control and ultimate, control of the software and hardware side of things. And you can use your existing hardware. So if you guys have just spent a whole bunch of money on brand new hardware for GP, obviously that investment is already done. So it's paid for, and life is good, so to speak. The cons of on-premise, well, there's many, but the first one is it's difficult to budget for. There's a lot of IT overhead. It's very costly to stay current on GP. So you're often not realizing ultimately all the value of the product. It's crazy how many companies we talk to that have no idea that there's a workflow engine for GP, so that you can automate a whole bunch of tasks, or that there's a web client for GP. If your partner hasn't, taken the time to explain, here's what's released in GP 2016, here's what's released in GP 2018, you just won't know. And oftentimes that is one of the big cons of on-premise. Infrastructure as a service, of course, you still have control. You can use those servers for other purposes as well. The cons are it's difficult to budget for. All of the cost uncertainties are still there, except you also have the cost uncertainty of what's called consumption. And consumption is basically a cost for usage, kind of like a cell phone plan. So depending on how much it's used, they send you a bill at the end of the month. And, again, you have no visibility into that until the bill is sent to you. So you also are paying for upgrades and everything else. And the last offering, again, trying not to be biased. I wanted to put more cons down there just so it didn't look biased, but hey, such is life. The pros are fixed price budgeting. So you pay a price and that's all that you're paying for. So it's very popular among sort of government and not-for-profit organizations, or ultimately anyone who has to really abide by a tight GP budget. Single sign-on, so the user experience and logon experience, as I'm going to show you in a couple slides, is very good and much improved over the other options. You also have partner freedom. Jason, I'm not going to take your later slides, so I won't cover that too much. Compliance is a big one. A lot of companies actually move to GP365 for compliance. So if GP is one of those applications that's hosted, but nobody's really ever looking at it, as long as it works, everybody's happy. But now, for whatever reason, you need to be more compliant and you want to start giving GP more focus so that you don't get blindsided on a Monday morning with it not working or your data being gone. That is a really big plus of what we do. And you also have access to some of the infrastructure and database side, which we'll talk about later. The cons, the main one really is that you don't have full control of the servers for the smaller packages of what we offer. And we'll talk again about that in more detail later. So Jason, with that, I'm going to drink some coffee and throw it over to you to talk about 4 tips that you guys just have to know before you make any decisions.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, John. Make sure you put some extra cream in that coffee. So there's usually a lot of confusion around the annual enhancement fee. So what I'm referring to when I say that, for those of you that don't know, in order to be entitled to the newest version of GP, you need to pay to your partner a fee, an annual fee that's then relayed to Microsoft. And it can be called the enhancement fee or an advantage fee or an enhanced advantage fee. They have all these different names for it, but basically it's a maintenance plan for the software. And a lot of people don't really understand what that entitles you to. So in a nutshell, the most important aspect is it does entitle you to upgrades and hot fixes and patches, as well as tax updates. So basically, without it, you're not able to, get the tax table updates for payroll. You're not going to get the newest version of the software when it comes out. And if you need a bug fix that's not available in your current version, you won't be able to get it. It also entitles you to some support. Now, I'll caveat that by saying the support that you get directly from Microsoft, depending on which version of the Advantage plan you take, because there are 3 or 4 different versions of it, can still cost money. And I also think it's important to note that 99% of the support that you're going to use for GP is going to be through a partner. Usually, you'll only engage Microsoft if it's something that the partner themselves can't solve. So when I say support, bear in mind, we're not talking about your day-to-day support. We're talking about those rare occasions where there's a massive bug in the software or you can't solve the problem even through a partner. So what happens if you don't pay it? So there's 2 scenarios. So if you're moving to a cloud provider, you can migrate to subscription licensing, in which case you are still entitled to the newest version of the software and all the other benefits that I've described, but eventually your perpetual license will lapse. So now you're completely reliant on those subscription licenses. Now, a couple of advantages with subscription licenses. Number 1, you can scale up and down the count of licenses that you need on a month-to-month basis with no penalties. The other thing is subscription licenses are based on named users, not on concurrent ones. So with the perpetual license, you can create as many users in GP as you want, but only as many can be logged in at a time as you're licensed for. With subscription, each user needs to have a license. The other scenario is, you can just let it lapse and, sort of ride out GP until the next version, but you won't be able to upgrade unless you catch up your enhancement plan. And of course, in order to do that, you need to pay all the missed years. So however many years you didn't pay the enhancement plan, you need to pay. Plus there's a penalty, which is not a major penalty, but it is a penalty. So our advice is, plan this out. If you're planning to stay on premise and you don't intend to upgrade GP in the future, then probably it would be the best idea would be to just let it lapse. There's no point in paying it. If you do want to continue using GP and you do want to go to the cloud, you should also consider the option of bringing your own license. Maybe you've made a significant investment in those licenses and you want to keep them. There's no problem with that. You can actually bring your own license to most of the SaaS providers like us, and we actually reduce the monthly cost accordingly. So you have both options. And then the other question is, would you ever need to move back to a perpetual license? So, are you doing this in an evaluation type format where you may not stay on the cloud and you might want to move back, in which case you probably do want to do a BYOL and keep those enhancements up to date. So talk a little bit about upgrading GP. So the main reason that we're going to want to upgrade is for features. So with every major version, Microsoft usually has 2 or 3 big shiny features that they introduce. Recently, those have been primarily around things like workflow and document attachment, but every now and then they'll introduce a big feature that sort of the community has been asking for, as well as usually hundreds of little features spread out throughout the system. So it's the main driving reason to upgrade is so that you have those access to those new features. Another one is, of course, that you want to be on a supported platform. So if we let GP get too old, you end up in a situation where you can't upgrade it on your current environment, and you have to get like a new SQL server and a new Windows server, and it becomes a major investment. If you don't upgrade, basically nothing will happen. You continue using the version as you have, but eventually the version you're on will be dropped by support, which means you won't be able to get any help from Microsoft should you need it. And of course, that risk increases over time because as time goes by, software and hardware start to fail, and you can find yourself in a position where you're being forced to upgrade for hardware reasons, but you can't because you can't get support. So that would be the main reason to continue upgrading. But other than that, you actually can continue to use the version you're on indefinitely. So our advice is to stay on a supported version at the bare minimum. Right now that's 2016, and that's going to be supported until 2021. So if you're on an older version than that, we do recommend at least get yourself there. The thing about upgrades is they're not just one-step upgrades. In some cases, if you've let yourself go, like if you're on GP 10 or GP 2010, you actually have to go from GP 2010 to 2013 to 2016 to 2018. You can't just go straight to 2018. So bear in mind
that just sounds bad. If they let themselves go, man, we're all doing that a little bit on COVID, aren't we?
I don't even want to talk about my hair. So, and you can probably hear a cat meowing in the background. So I guess the illusion of me being at a professional office is sort of blown out the window. So, and another thing to check is if you're going to move to the cloud, not all cloud providers will give you free upgrades. So make sure you check into that. Of course, GP365 does give free upgrades, but obviously that can be an expensive notion as well. And if you're on a cloud platform, at some point the cloud provider can force you to upgrade. So you definitely want to make sure you understand their policies around that.
Perfection.
So what's included in the cloud? So I guess it's different for every provider. What could be included is upgrades, as we just talked about. Technical support is usually included because obviously you don't have access to the underlying infrastructure yourself. Licensing is often included, but not always. Apps can be included. In our case, we do have some apps that we give away when you become a subscriber. And training. Some companies will provide free training events. As a plug here, of course, all of those are included with GP365. What's not usually included is functional support. So that would be, assistance with not getting maybe access to GP, but once you're in GP, if you need help with a feature or a function, that would be what we call functional support, because it's not related to the technical infrastructure that's driving GP. Sometimes consumption is not included in these plans. Add-on renewals usually are not included. So if you have, apps from third parties like E1, Smart List Builder, or Professional Advantage Collections Management, very oftentimes you still need to pay those add-ons licenses separately. Sometimes migration is not included. So some hosting providers will charge you to do the migration. And any setup fees that are associated with it, as well as any initial upgrades that need to be done to bring you up to their minimum standards. So for GP365, everything there is included except for the third-party add-on renewals and functional support. So we do free migrations, there's no setup fees, and we also do the upgrades for free. So our advice is to be very careful, particularly around those consumption costs. They can get really, really expensive. GP is a very chatty app, so it tends to do a lot of network broadcasting, and the way it runs queries can be very sort of, I guess, inefficient from a compute standpoint, a compute time standpoint. So you want to be careful that you understand all the costs that could be associated with going to the cloud, so you're not surprised down the road.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, I think you sort of mentioned this a few minutes ago, but keep in mind as well with the version of GP that you're on. So if you're on an unsupported version, depending on the cloud provider that you go to, they may offer like a single step upgrade, or they may upgrade you to the latest version if you're on, a supported version. Obviously their policy sort of differs. So keep that in mind too. Like if you're on GP 2016 right now, it may be worth exploring things now while you're on a supported version, as opposed to if you wait until 2021, you're on an unsupported version, you might have to pay to do one step, but then they'll do the rest. So just keep all of those things in mind. With us, we upgrade you to the latest version regardless of your version. This is a promo we're actually running for COVID, for organizations that want to move things so that they can access GP from anywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Another important tip is partner portability, easy for me to say. So what we're talking about here is your annual enhancement fees that you're paying to your partner of record. That's what POR is. You're not necessarily tied to them if you're on a perpetual model with the GP in-house. But if you move to a cloud provider, you want to make sure that the cloud provider doesn't force you to use a specific partner of record, because maybe you have a great relationship with your partner, or maybe you have a very specialized business with a partner that supports that type of industry. So you want to be careful that you're able to sort of take your partner with you in those circumstances. Of course, sometimes, and you don't have a good relationship with your partner. We've seen that quite a bit, and very, very often they won't have spoken even in years in some cases. So in those particular cases, you probably want to look at maybe getting a new partner of record, and so make sure that any cloud provider you move to has a good repository of partners, and isn't going to be sort of completely selfish and biased and just sort of assign them all to the same partner. Really, the partner that you use does depend on your needs. Not all partners are the same, so you want to make sure that you understand that. So yeah, basically the bottom line is you want to make sure you have a partner-friendly hosting provider, a cloud provider, so that you can continue to get the support that you need. And in cases where you're not getting good support in the first place, you want somebody that's going to have that depth of expertise to know where you would be best suited to get help.
Cool.
Oh, and one other thing, yeah, of course, I should mention, you want to check to make sure you understand the contract term. We put a 100-year contract here as an example, but you want to make sure that you do have a way out if you need to get off the cloud and go back on premise, or to move to another cloud provider in the event you're not happy. So be aware that you're checking the contract term to understand how long you're locked in for, if at all.
Yeah,
GP365 is 1-year contract.
Perfect. Yeah, I was just going to say there's a pretty big GP hosting company who will remain nameless, who has a 3-year and sometimes 5-year contract. So be careful. That's obviously a very long time. 1 year is, I would say, pretty standard. Usually there's quite a bit of work that the partner has to do to move you over, and obviously they're doing that for free, or should be doing that for free. So there's usually a term, but it should not be more than 1 year. Okay. With that, let's talk about what we do and actually show you what life would be like if you decided to move GP into the cloud. So this is the last PowerPoint slide before I dive into the demo, and then we'll finish off with a couple other items. So what do we do specifically? We take your Microsoft Dynamics GP product, we move it into the Azure Enterprise Data Center. You can pick whether you reside in either the Canadian data center or the US, depending on obviously your business and your compliance laws. And it's basically GP as a service. The big thing here to take away from this slide is it's the same experience from a GP perspective that you're used to. So there's no retraining, there's no having to learn how to do anything differently. The only difference is you're going to launch GP a slightly different way. You're going to be paying a per user per month cost, which you can scale up or down. Very common, especially now. A bunch of our customers have unfortunately scaled down their users to try and save costs. So that's another big benefit of the cloud and us. And sorry to go back to Jason's point, read your contract. If you're locked into, let's say, a year or 3-year contract, make sure that you can scale your users up or down, because there's, I would say, most providers out there don't let you do that, which sort of, in my opinion, takes away from one of the big benefits of doing this. So check that out. And the packages that we offer start from $100 a month per user. That would be your very basic GP installation that doesn't have any integrations or any add-ons. The package that's most popular is $175 a month, and those prices are in US dollars. If you're interested, at the end of the session today, I'm going to throw up a poll at the end asking you if you'd like more information or some pricing. If you would, no pressure, I'm happy to send that to you and talk over the more specifics of our price and how we work. But with that, let's talk about what GP 365 actually looks like. So this is actually GP 365. What you're seeing here is a couple different things. At the bottom is Power BI. So I'm not sure how many of you use Power BI, but if you don't, you should. It is awesome. It's a reporting tool that not only allows you to report on a variety of different aspects of GP, but you can also connect it to other data sources. And the really cool part about Power BI is that it has so many pre-built charts and dashboards specifically for GP. So it's not like your typical reporting product where you have to, install the product and then you have to build any report you want from scratch. You're going to get a whole bunch of preset charts and dashboards to play with, and some of them will be useful, some of them will not be. There's some really cool stuff that you can do with it. It has something called real-time language search, which basically means you can talk to it and you could say, show me revenue by this, by that, and it will automatically create the chart in front of you, or you could type it if you're antisocial. Either way, it's a really cool feature, and we embed it as part of the GP 365 experience. And if you'd like, we will even install it and install the GP content pack for you for free. The only thing you need to do is make sure you have the Power BI license. Most of you will if you have a package of Office 365. There's also a free version of Power BI. And anyhow, it's a really great product. Not going to talk about it too much, but it's, again, fantastic. In terms of applications, the main application that you guys are going to be launching is, of course, GP. Any type of third-party product that you access outside of GP would be listed here as an app. Any type of third-party product that resides inside of GP will still be inside of GP in exactly the same spot it is right now. But things like Management Reporter that you access by launching outside of GP would be published here as an app. Jason, what are some other good examples of common apps that would be outside?
Maybe Smart Connect would be one. Profix, the budgeting tool.
Right.
Integration Manager.
Perfect. Now, in terms of, well, some of these other areas are grayed out, mainly because they, I don't think they're overly important to see in the demo, but integration center is where you would manage all of your integrations to GP. Training center, we're actually going to talk about very soon. I should have prepared a little demo for this, but it's okay. It's a cool thing we're releasing in about a month. Shopping center is where you scale your users up or down, and support center is where you open tickets. So let's go to where I think you're going to be going most often, which is GP. So this is how it would work. You would come in the morning, you would have this saved as a bookmark, and if you wanted to access GP, you would simply click the button. Now, when you click the button, GP launches in a full screen experience, which I hope everybody's seeing. Jason, you guys can see it?
I do indeed.
Okay, cool. So it's that simple. We're now inside of GP and we're using GP as we would. There's some cool features that are, a really interesting part of what we do. And the first one is session reliability. So I don't know if you guys ever are in a scenario where you're in the middle of a transaction and you need to go home or your internet disconnects or anything like that. If that happens, typically you have to close the transaction, go home, and ultimately start over. Or if the internet disconnects, you may get a stuck batch, or you may get those annoying SQL errors that you have to X a bunch of times to close. GP365 has session state reliability, which means you can be in the middle of a transaction, close your laptop, or if your session disconnects, go home, open it back up, and when you log back in and click that button to launch GP, it's actually going to bring you exactly where you were. So you're not going to lose any of your work. It's going to bring you to the exact screen where you left off. Another really cool thing is all of the printer and document mapping. So this whole solution is, of course, made just for GP, and everything has been optimized for GP. So not only does it run really quickly, but all of the printers and printer drivers are all optimized for GP. So things like alignment issues with checks or any other sort of issues that you may experience, with typical hosting providers are sort of all taken care of for you. So it's a really slick way to access GP. And there's a couple other cool things I could show you. The first one is the ability to export documents. So if you run a smart list, you can export it to your local GP365 drive, and then you can refer back to it later. Jason, anything else that you feel would be really cool to show? I think most of the users here are pretty familiar with GP, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here. But
yeah, no, I think you've covered it. Obviously, we're looking at the newest version of GP, so they may not be familiar with those business intelligence insights homepage. That's a new feature that came out in 2018 R2. But no, I think you've covered for the most part, what they're going to see in GP that's going to make a big difference.
Cool. Yeah, and this is, of course, the full client. So if some of you are looking at this and going, whoa, it looks very different, you're either on an old version of GP or you're using the web client. So you really like the full client. It's a great experience. And one of the big features of what we do is we serve the full client experience from anywhere that you have an internet connection. So let me just show you something. I'll let it kick me off here. So let's say that you're, this seems like a very unrealistic example, but you're in Mexico, you're on vacation, and you have to log into GP, but you don't have your computer. You could just simply launch GP through what we call the browser version, which launches that same full client, but as opposed to launching it in the full experience like this, it'll launch it directly in the browser. And what that does is it leaves no trace of anything. Not even a trace of the installer. It's just a really simple way to launch it if you're on a computer that isn't your own. So I'm going to launch this. It'll kick my other session out. And we're actually inside of GP, but now we're inside of GP in the browser. And it's the exact same experience that I just showed you. You can still do everything that you can in the full client, but we're inside of a web page. So it's a really cool feature. I would say about 10% of our users use the browser-based version. Most people seem to prefer the full client. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a little look at what that looks like. And if you have any questions or you would like us to show anything else, please just let me know. And yeah, we're happy to do that. What else can I show you here? So a couple things quickly. You can restrict pretty much everything within GP365 through the user security and user roles. If you'd like only some users to be able to increase and decrease the user count in Shopping Center, you can just grant some users access to that. We have a really cool guided tour. Some of you will probably recognize this. We've brought Clippy back from the dead.
Oh God, Lord help us.
I love this stuff. And basically, you get to go through everything that GP365 can do. So for new users, it's a pretty cool little feature and a great way of just kind of orientating users that maybe weren't part of the training session. Okay, let's keep going.
So this is our roadmap. So as you would expect from any software as a service provider, we're constantly developing and enhancing the product that we've built. So we have the next major rollout. We call it Core Enhancements. It's actually in testing right now. It's going to be released, hopefully by the end of June. And what we're going to have in this release is we're going to support two-factor authentication. So for those of you with heavy compliance requirements, we'll be able to enable Azure TFA, which will allow you to have like a token or a device that validates your identity. You'll also be able to manage the backup process. So right now we back everything up according to best practices. But with this release, you'll actually be able to set the retention policies, how often it's backed up, and you'll also be able to do on-demand backups, and then download those backups to your local storage if you want. So that's a pretty handy feature. We'll also be federating with your domain. So what this means is you log into your local area network with your user credentials, and it will automatically log you into GP365. So you won't have to put in a username and password at all. Right now, we already support social sign-in, so that would be Google and Microsoft, but this will extend it so that you can actually federate with your own domain. File Center, so there's storage that comes with GP365. So if you create Excel reports or PDF something, you can save all of that on storage on GP365. With File Center, we're going to allow you to synchronize that storage to local storage, as well as a really snappy way to browse it. So you'll have all the files exposed directly in the portal, and you'll also be able to secure those down based on GP365 user roles, so that you can control who can see what. And One Button Company, I think I should read One Button Test Company. So, if you ever needed a test company because you're going to do some experimenting, a lot of people are familiar with that. They'll call their partner. The partner will take a fresh copy of their live database, and they'll make a copy of it. We're going to have it so you can just do that in the portal by clicking a button. So basically, you can make a test company on your own. Q2, and this may be actually moved up as well because I think we're a bit ahead of schedule, but we're going to be releasing Training Center. So the concept here is rather than YouTube videos, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that'll cover a variety of topics from GP, including us. We put a lot of them out there. But if you're looking for a very specific thing, like how do I create a recurring GL entry or something like that, usually you'll have to scroll through the whole video and try to find that one topic. What we've done is we've created a bunch of micro videos. So exactly that idea. So, if you need to know how to create a recurring backup, you'll be able to go to Training Center, type in the keyword recurring, and it'll have all the videos related to recurring entries. And you can click and watch just that, less than 1 minute or 2 minute video on how to do that one thing that you're looking to do. So it's a great training resource for both new users that are coming on the system as well as existing users that need help with some, obscure functionality that maybe they don't use very often. In Q3, we're releasing our expense app, so this will be Expense Center. Basically, for those of you that are familiar with the expense capabilities in GP now, it's called Project.
Uh-oh, Jason, I think we lost you there.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so for those of you that are familiar with PTE, which is Project Time and Expense inside of GP, there's a lot of weaknesses, particularly related to the sort of employee self-service functions. So the people that want to submit expenses, they have to use the web client traditionally. That's how it's done. And obviously it's just not a very good experience. You can't attach receipts. It doesn't handle taxes very well. The approval process can be cumbersome. So we've basically built our own app that will be available on mobile devices, on tablets, through the web, or as the app itself, to give people a variety of sort of options for entering their expenses. You'll be able to take a picture of a receipt, and it'll automatically attach it to that expense entry, as well as the approval process is much improved because we're doing it inside of the GP365 portal. And ultimately, you'll have the option of how you want those expenses to appear in GP. They can appear traditionally, as Project Time and Expense does, as project accounting records, or you'll have the option of creating them as payables entries directly to your employees or vendors, or as a third option, you'll be able to create them as general journal entries with analytical accounting attached. So basically, we're opening up the flexibility to you determine how you want those expenses to appear. And we're also going to have advanced tip and tax handling. So for those of you that are familiar with Project Time and Expense, if you put in an amount, you can have it so GP will automatically calculate the tax on it, but it's not aware of tips, right? So it always ends up being adjustments, tons of adjustments that the back office people need to make. Our app is going to be smart enough to handle that properly. And then finally, in Q4 of the year, we're going to be doing Time Center. Exact same concept as the expense app. It's just for doing time entries. So for payroll or for project accounting, you'll be able to do those time entries on a mobile device or a laptop, and it'll have that slick approval process in place, same as the Expense Center will, and ultimately those records will end up in GP.
Awesome. I just thought of something actually that might be, looking at the questions here, might be something we'll have to cover, which is the typical migration process, which I don't think is part of this. So Jason, remind me before we let everybody go. For those that are interested, we'll walk through sort of what a typical migration process looks like and when it happens and how long it takes and that sort of thing.
You got it.
Okay, so the first thing to mention here is that these prices are in Canadian. Apologies, I know I gave you another price before for our products that were in US. Really, this just comes down to I grabbed the wrong pricing grid and I just noticed it now. So apologies. If you're in the US, you can pretty much subtract 35% off of most of this stuff, give or take. But these prices are based in Canadian, and they're based on 3 users. So let's just quickly go through. What I'm trying to do here is give you a rough look at total cost of ownership over 3 years for each of the offerings that we've been discussing today. So the first one is on-premise. Now again, some of these costs may not be relevant. For example, hardware investment. If you already have a new server and everything is good with it, it doesn't need to be refreshed, ignore it. We've budgeted for annual maintenance fees, which are the fees that Jason was describing earlier for both GP and SQL. The next one is GP upgrade. So that is a fee for upgrading GP and staying current. If you only do that once every 2 years, then you can remove the middle cost. Technical GP support are things like anything that's technical support related, things maybe that would be like a user's having trouble with logging in or forgetting their password or anything like that. That's all covered free of charge with us. And basically what we've done here is we've broken down the costs over the 3 years to give you a sense of what it looks like. So for a 3-year period, $36,500. Infrastructure as a service, which is hosting it in an enterprise cloud like Microsoft Azure, where we too host our offering. So there's a couple different things here to look at. The first one is your annual server hosting costs. It is quite expensive, and consumption costs can be way more than that. But 3 users, it's not a whole lot, so I kept it pretty low. The big scary part about these first 2 options is that there's no cost predictability. Like if you come in on Monday and GP's broken, you're ultimately going to be paying a partner or someone many hours to bring it back up and fix it. Whereas with software as a service, you don't really have to worry about that. It's all done, included in the platform. So then you've seen the annual maintenance fees, GP upgrade, and all of the other stuff that we just kind of went through. So if you look at total cost of ownership over 3 years, we're at $65,100. Now, it is important to mention that both option 2 and 3 are, a very high level of infrastructure, like enterprise grade compliance and so on. Whereas, if you have a server hosted in a broom closet, I'm being extreme. There might be some security issues there and some compliance issues. Whereas with the second 2 offerings, you're rock solid. Our pricing is really simple. It's priced at a per user cost per month. This is actually the middle package, which is 230 Canadian or 175 US per month. There's an option below that for $100 US per month, and it just doesn't provide access to third-party add-ons, management reporter, and a couple other items which we can talk about later. But as you can see, not only is it a way better logon experience, it's also easy to budget for. You can change user count, and in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. If you're in a situation where you guys haven't spent any money on GP in a lot of years, and you're looking at these costs going, this is nothing like what we spend, I would sort of rebuttal that with, you probably should be. And at some point, it's kind of like not changing your oil a lot. That will likely bite you. So either way, I hope this is helpful. And if you guys would like to dig into any more of these costs, either now or offline, feel free to write me a question. And the last thing here before we let everybody go for the day and I talk about the migration is our upcoming events. So for those of you who know us, we are known for free training, doing loads of content. We write at least, I would say, a blog a week. So if you go to gp365.ca and go to our blogs, there's all sorts of cool topics there, like how to fix stuck batches and other common items that users struggle with. We're very training focused. We have 2 types of training. We have free sessions like this that are webinars, and we run those every few weeks, maybe once a month, maybe more depending on schedules. We have one on project accounting July 16th, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. If you're not using project accounting, or maybe you haven't used it in a long time and want a refresher, join. It's free. There's only 100 seats and it will definitely fill, so grab yours. Another one that we're doing in August is the 5 best must-have GP add-ons that we find most companies do not have. And that's August 13th, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. We also have boot camps. These are aimed at being a more, I would say, complete, all-inclusive event. We ran one on Management Reporter 3 or 4 months ago, and it was so popular that we're actually going to do it again. So Tuesday, July 21st, it's all day. We're toying with the idea of making it a half day. So if you have any feedback, let us know. The cost would be half as well. But the idea here is you're coming out of this all-day session with everything you need to know to build your own reports and ultimately be an expert in Management Reporter. The boot camps have a cost. They're $600 per day. Or if you're a GP365 customer, it's $300. So it's basically half the cost. And if you guys have any other ideas, or you'd like us to cover a certain module like HR or something like that, email us. We'd love to obviously cover new sessions, and your feedback is imperative to how we sort of evolve. So I am going to be giving away a $100 Amazon gift card, and not to be annoying, but I'm going to post the winner on social media. Usually I do it live in the session, but there's a lot of people joined today and I haven't had time to do the random generator. So I'm going to post it on social media. So go like our social channels. It's also a good way for us to make sure you guys are following our events and we can stay in touch. I will post it today, so before 5 o'clock. Questions? Does anybody have any questions besides the migration?
Can I get a gift card?
No.
Thanks.
All right, so I'll cover the migration quickly. If anybody has any questions, I'll keep an eye on the box. Otherwise, if you have no interest in the migration at all, I'm going to throw up a quick poll here as I explain this last topic. So if anybody here has interest in GP365 and you'd like some pricing or a quote, let us know. Happy to do that. Not going to be the annoying sales guy who calls you every week, just so that you have something to budget for down the road. Okay, so migrations. Here is how it works. Usually there is a period of off-peak. Generally, it's over the weekend. So we will say Friday at 5 o'clock, please everybody, log out of GP. We take a copy of your database, we bring it into the GP365 cloud, we upgrade you to the latest version, and then on Sunday, we perform testing. So we run through all of our tests to make sure that ultimately everything looks good from our side. We're bringing over all of your data. So absolutely everything comes, all of your reports come, everything will work the same as it did. After we perform our testing on Sunday, you'll perform testing. We generally designate one contact. So someone from your side who knows GP quite well will do some testing, make sure that they can open GP and everything looks proper before Monday's go live. Now, before that weekend, there is some really important things that we have to do as a group. The first one is we train you guys on how to launch GP through GP365, which is a pretty easy process. We also will offer, if you'd like, to walk your team through all of the new features that have been released since whatever version of GP you're on. And it's a great way of knowing what's there. For example, if you didn't know workflow existed, let's talk about it and see how it applies to you. And if you have a partner who typically would have that conversation, bring them in too. We can all talk as a group, or you can have that dialogue with them. So with that, I think that's all I got. I really appreciate everyone's time today, and I hope to see many of you guys on the next session in a couple weeks. Jason,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the time.
Okay, guys, have a good rest of the day and stay safe. Talk to everybody soon.